David, after everything we have been through, after all I did for you, I literally gave you my life, my time, just for you to be a great person. I thought you loved me.
Amaka, I never meant to hurt you.
But you did. David, I sold everything for you. My time, my jewelry, my happiness. And you treat me like this.
I didn't beg you for all of that. Amaka, you are not my class anymore.
David, how could you?
The past is now in the past, Amaka. You are now a thing of the past. I'm not on the same level with you anymore. Thanks for what you did for me.
David, please don't do this.
It's done.
I sold everything I had to send the man I loved abroad, but the day he came back, he didn't come back for me. The day David came back to town, Amaka wore her best dress. She had ironed it 3 times. She had oiled her skin until it glowed like polished wood. She had even tied her hair the way David always said he loved. She stood near the big mango tree at the edge of the road, her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She had waited 2 years for this moment. 2 long, painful, lonely years. She had sold her gold earrings. She had sold her mother's extra wrapper. She had given everything she had so that David could chase his dream. And now, finally, he was coming home. But when the car door opened and David stepped out smiling, the woman who stepped out behind him was not someone Amaka had ever seen before. She was tall, fair-skinned, and dressed in expensive clothes. She held David's hand like she owned it. And David, the same David who had promised Amaka forever, looked straight at her and smiled like she was just another face in the crowd. That was the day Amaka's whole world cracked open like dry ground in a drought. Amaka had grown up in a quiet, dusty town where everybody knew everybody. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, sold foodstuff in the open market: gari, palm oil, dried fish, pepper, crayfish. Every morning before the sun was fully awake, Amaka would be at her mother's side, measuring and wrapping goods, calling out prices, and greeting customers with a warm smile. Life was not easy, but it was honest. People in the town knew Amaka as the girl with the good heart. Old women would stop just to touch her face and say, "God will bless you, my daughter." Young men admired her from a distance, afraid to approach someone who carried herself with so much quiet dignity. She never showed off. She never looked down on anyone. She simply walked, smiled, and believed that one day, life would reward her faithfulness. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, was a small woman with big eyes and a voice that could silence a market full of noise. She had raised Amaka alone after Amaka's father passed away when Amaka was just 7 years old. That loss had made both of them strong in different ways. Mama Ngozi became tough and careful. Amaka became gentle but determined. They were different, but they loved each other deeply. Every evening after the market, they would sit together outside their small house, eat whatever they had cooked, and talk about the day. Mama Ngozi always said the same thing before bed: "Amaka, your reward is coming. Just don't give your gold to someone who only sees copper." Amaka always laughed when she said that. She never thought those words would one day feel like a prophecy. It was on a Thursday morning, market day, that everything changed. A young man walked into Mama Ngozi's store looking for groundnut oil. He was different from the men in town. He wore clean clothes, spoke with confidence, and asked questions like someone who had read many books. His name was David. He had come to visit his uncle in the town for a few weeks. He bought the oil, smiled at Amaka, and said, "You have the most patient eyes I have ever seen." Amaka looked away quickly, but she smiled. And just like that, without noise or drama, something small and warm was planted between 2 strangers. Nobody knew then that one small smile on a market morning would lead to one of the greatest heartbreaks the town had ever witnessed. If you love emotional stories that teach real-life lessons, make sure you subscribe, because this story will touch your heart in a way you don't expect. David did not leave after a few weeks. He kept finding reasons to stay. He visited the market every day, sometimes buying things he did not even need, just to stand near Amaka and talk. He told her about his life, how he had studied hard, how he wanted to travel abroad and study engineering, how he dreamed of building things that would last. Amaka listened to every word. She loved the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his dreams. She had never met a man who dreamed so loudly and so honestly. Most men in her town talked about land, wives, and money. David talked about the future like it was already waiting for him with open arms. And slowly, without planning it, Amaka began to believe in his future too. Their friendship grew into something deeper as the weeks passed. David started walking her home after the market. He helped her carry heavy bags. He sat with her mother and ate her food without being invited, which Mama Ngozi loved because she said a man who eats your food without shame trusts you. He fixed the broken leg on their wooden bench without being asked. He made Amaka laugh in a way she had never laughed before, from deep in her belly, the kind of laugh that comes out even when you are trying to hold it in. The town watched them with warm eyes. Old women whispered that Amaka had finally found her person. Young girls envied her quietly. Even the market women, who were usually full of opinions, nodded and said David seemed like a good man. Mama Ngozi, however, was careful. She liked David, yes. But she watched him the way a woman who has seen pain watches anything that promises joy. One evening, she called Amaka inside and spoke to her quietly. "That boy has fire in his eyes," she said. "But fire can warm you or burn you. Watch which one he is." Amaka told her she understood. But the truth was, love had already settled in her heart like a warm cloth on a cold night, and it was very hard to feel danger when you feel that warm. David had started calling her his queen. He had started talking about when we build our future. He had started making plans that included her name. And Amaka, who had never been chosen like that before, held on to every word. One Sunday afternoon, as they sat under the mango tree watching the sky turn orange, David held Amaka's hand and said the words that changed everything. "Amaka," he said quietly, "I love you. I have never said that to anyone and meant it. But I mean it with you." Amaka felt tears prick her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears that come when something too beautiful to believe is suddenly happening to you. She squeezed his hand and said, "I love you too, David." And they sat there as the evening swallowed the sun, holding hands, full of hope, full of plans, full of a love that felt unbreakable. Neither of them spoke about the cost of that love. Not yet. But it was coming. And when it came, it would cost more than either of them had prepared for. 3 months into their relationship, David sat Amaka down and told her something that shifted the ground beneath her. He had been accepted to study engineering at a university abroad. It was real. He had the letter. But there was a problem, a very big problem. He did not have the money for the flight, the school fees, or the accommodation. His family could not help. His uncle in town had already given him what little he could. He looked at Amaka with eyes that were half hopeful and half ashamed. "I don't want to ask you," he said. "But I don't know who else to ask. And I know that if I go, I will come back and give you everything. I promise you, Amaka. This is not just for me. This is for us." Amaka sat with those words for 3 days. She did not sleep well. She thought about her mother. She thought about the market business. She thought about the gold earrings her father had left her before he died. She thought about the small savings she had put away coin by coin over 2 years of working. She thought about what her friends would say, what her mother would say, what the town would say. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw David's face, honest, hopeful, loving. And she thought, if I believe in him now, he will never forget this. If I stand by him now, he will stand by me forever. That thought made her decision feel easy, even when it was hard. She started with her gold earrings. She sold them to a woman 3 streets away without telling her mother. Then she sold a small piece of jewelry her aunt had given her at her coming-of-age ceremony. She added her savings. It was still not enough. So she did something that hurt her more than anything else. She went into her mother's small savings box. Mom Ngozi kept money in a tin inside the kitchen cupboard, wrapped in an old cloth. It was money for the business, for emergencies, for rent. Amaka counted out a portion, not all of it, but enough to matter, and she told herself she would replace it before her mother noticed. When she put the money in David's hands, he held her face and said, "I will never forget this." Never. She believed him completely. Her friends, especially her closest friend Chisholm, were not happy. Chisholm pulled her aside one afternoon and spoke with fire in her voice. "Amaka, you are too kind for your own good. You are giving this man your blood. What if he goes and forgets you? What if he meets somebody over there? These things happen." Amaka shook her head. "David is not that kind of man, Chisholm. You don't know him the way I know him." Chisholm held her hand and looked at her seriously. "That is what every woman says before she gets her heart broken." Amaka pulled away gently and said, "When he comes back and we build our life together, you will come and celebrate with us." Chisholm said nothing. She just nodded slowly and looked at Amaka the way you look at someone walking towards something dangerous, praying they get through it safely, but afraid they won't. David left on a rainy Tuesday morning. Amaka stood at the motor park with her mother and Chisholm and watched the bus carry him away. He waved from the window until she could no longer see his hand. She stood there even after the bus disappeared, as if standing long enough would make him turn back around. Her mother put a hand on her shoulder. Amaka held herself together in public. But that night, alone in her room, she cried into her pillow until the cloth was wet. She cried not because she was sad he was gone, she cried because she loved him so much it scared her. She cried because she had given him everything she had, and all she had left now was the waiting. The first weeks were beautiful. David called every 2 days. His voice was warm and full of excitement. He told her about the cold weather, the big buildings, the strange food, the university. He made her laugh with stories about how he had worn 3 sweaters and still been cold. He said, "Amaka, I miss your jollof rice. I miss your voice. I miss everything about you." She would replay those calls in her mind over and over again, warm and glowing. She wrote his name on the inside cover of her notebook. She told the market women proudly, "He called again last night." Life felt light. Life felt like it was working exactly the way it was supposed to. But slowly, like a candle burning down, the calls began to shrink. First, they moved from every 2 days to once a week. Then once every 2 weeks. Then it was just short messages, "Busy with school, everything is fine, I'll call soon." Amaka told herself it was normal. School is hard. He is adjusting. He is working. She made excuses the way you make excuses for someone you love, carefully, gently, with hope. But as the months passed and the messages got shorter and more distant, something cold began to creep into her chest. She began to feel it when she woke up in the morning, that hollow, anxious feeling of loving someone who no longer seems to feel you reaching for them. She called him one night and he answered, but his voice sounded different. Like he was somewhere else even while he was speaking to her. She asked, "David, is everything okay between us?" He said, "Amaka, why are you asking that?" "Of course. I'm just tired from school." She said, "You hardly call anymore." He said, "I told you it's busy. Don't make this harder than it already is." And he ended the call. Amaka sat on her bed staring at the wall for a long time. Something in her knew. The way a woman always knows, deep down, before the proof arrives, before the confirmation, before the final blow. She knew something had changed. She just did not want to believe it. So she folded her fear into a small quiet box, pushed it to the back of her heart, and kept waiting. Because she was Amaka. And Amaka was not a woman who gave up on the people she loved. What Amaka did not know, because no one told her, was that David had changed the moment he settled into his new life abroad. The university was large and full of people from different places. David was sharp and charming, and he made friends quickly. He worked a part-time job on campus and studied hard. He was doing exactly what he had said he would do. But he was also doing something he had never mentioned. He was slowly becoming someone else. The values he had carried from the small town, the simplicity, the humility, the love for a woman waiting at home, those things started to feel small and far away, like a song you once knew but can no longer remember clearly. That was when he met her. Her name was Alena. She was the daughter of a wealthy businessman, and she walked like the world belonged to her. She was in David's engineering class, and she always sat 2 rows in front of him. She was confident, sharp, and generous with her smile. She helped him when he struggled with a difficult assignment. They studied together. They ate together. And before David fully understood what was happening, he found himself thinking about Alena more than he thought about Amaka. He told himself it was just friendship. He said it to himself so many times that for a while, he almost believed it. Elena's family had connections that David had only dreamed about. Her father owned construction companies. Her uncle sat on the board of a powerful engineering firm. When Alena invited David to her family's home for a dinner one weekend, he sat at a table with people who could open every door he had ever knocked on in his dreams. He sat there in his best shirt, watching how they lived, how they laughed, how effortlessly power moved through their family like water through a river. And something in David changed that night. Something small but permanent. He looked around that table and thought, this is the life I want. And standing between him and that life was not Amaka. It was Alena. He stopped calling Amaka completely after that. He told himself he would explain later. He told himself he would find the right words. But the truth he did not say out loud was much simpler and much crueler. He had made his choice. He had chosen the opportunity over the love. He had chosen the connection over the commitment. He had weighed Amaka's sacrifice against Elena's family's wealth, and in his heart, he had quietly placed Amaka down and reached for something that sparkled brighter. He did not think about the gold earrings she had sold. He did not think about her mother's tin box. He did not think about the girl who had stood at the motor park in the rain, watching a bus take him away, trusting him with her whole heart. He simply moved forward. And he never looked back. At this point, what would you do if you were in her shoes? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you're feeling this story already, don't forget to subscribe. Red Heart. News travels fast in a small town. Before David's car even reached the main road, people already knew he was coming. Someone's cousin had seen him at the bus station in the city. A woman who sold bread near the highway had spotted his face in a passing car. By the time the vehicle turned into the town, a small crowd had already gathered near the big mango tree. People were excited. They saw David as proof that their town could produce success. They wanted to celebrate him. They wanted to shake his hand and say they had always known he would make it. Amaka was among them, wearing her best dress, her heart beating with everything she had held onto for 2 years. Chisholm stood beside her, not saying a word, but holding her hand tight. Mama Ngozi had stayed home. She had said she was not feeling well, but the truth was, something in her spirit had made her uneasy since morning. She had been stirring her soup without tasting it, staring at the wall with old eyes that had seen too much of the world to believe only the good parts. She had prayed quietly in her corner and said, God, let me be wrong. But God, it seemed, had already written this chapter. The car door opened. David stepped out, and the crowd cheered. He had filled out. He was dressed in fine clothes. He smiled at the people around him with the ease of a man who had learned confidence in a place where confidence was currency. He waved. He shook hands. He laughed. And then the other door opened, and Alena stepped out. She was beautiful in the way of a woman who had never had to fight for anything. She adjusted her sunglasses, looked around the small town with polite curiosity, and reached for David's hand. David took her hand without hesitation. And with his other hand, he pointed at something in the distance, showing her the town, explaining it like a guide, not like a man who had come home. Amaka's hand dropped from Chisholm's grip. The air left her body. She stood completely still as David walked through the crowd and finally, inevitably, his eyes landed on her. He looked at her the way you look at someone you once knew a long time ago, with recognition but not with love. "Amaka," he said, and his voice was steady and almost kind, which made it worse. "Good to see you. This is Elena, my wife." Those 4 words hit her like 4 separate stones. "My wife." Chisholm grabbed her arm to hold her up. The crowd went silent. Someone whispered. Someone else turned away. Amaka stood there in her best dress, in front of the whole town, and she felt every sold earring, every borrowed coin, every lonely night, all of it crashed down on her at once. She did not cry. She could not. She was too broken even for tears. Amaka did not speak for 3 days. She went inside her house, lay on her bed, and stayed there. She did not go to the market. She did not eat much. She did not answer when neighbors knocked on the door to check on her. Mom Ngozi sat beside her every night and said nothing, just rubbed her back slowly the way she had done when Amaka was a little girl with a fever. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not talk about David at all. She just stayed beside her daughter the way a tree stays beside a river, silent, rooted, present. The town was full of talk. People discussed David's return like it was a performance they had all paid to see. Some were angry on Amaka's behalf. Old women cursed David quietly in the market. Market women who had watched Amaka grow up shook their heads and said it was a wicked thing he had done. But there were others, and this was the part that hurt Amaka even more than David's betrayal, there were others who whispered about her. They said she had been foolish. They said she had been too free with her money. They said a woman who gives a man everything before he marries her deserves what she gets. Those words cut deep. Because pain from a stranger is easier to bear than judgment from your own community. Chisholm came every day. She would sit beside Amaka on the bed or on the floor and just talk about small, ordinary things. She talked about the funny customer who had tried to return yam he had already cooked. She talked about a new hairstyle she was thinking of trying. She never mentioned David. She never asked Amaka how she was feeling, because she could see it clearly. Amaka was not fine, and both of them knew it. But Chisholm understood that what her friend needed was not to talk about the pain. She needed to remember that the world outside still existed, still moved, still had small, ordinary, beautiful things in it. And slowly, on the 4th day, Amaka sat up in bed and ate the food Mom Ngozi brought her. It was a small thing. But it was the first move. On the 7th night, Amaka walked out to the back of the house alone and looked up at the sky. It was full of stars, the kind of sky that makes you feel small but also strangely safe, like the universe is too big for your problem to be the only thing in it. She stood there for a long time. She thought about her father, who had died and left them with nothing but his good name. She thought about her mother, who had built a life out of gari and palm oil and sheer stubbornness. She thought about everything she had lost. And then, slowly, something shifted inside her. Not a loud thing. Not a lightning bolt. Just a quiet, hard decision, the kind that comes from the very bottom of a person, where the real strength lives. She whispered to the sky, "I will not stay broken." And the stars did not answer. But the decision had been made. Amaka returned to the market on a Monday morning. She tied her wrapper tight, carried the empty baskets, and walked with her mother to the store without fanfare. People stared. Some greeted her carefully, like they were afraid she might break. She greeted every single one of them back, loudly, warmly, with a smile that cost her something but that she gave freely anyway. She arranged the goods. She called out prices. She weighed the Gary with steady hands. By the end of that first day, her arms were tired but her eyes were clear. She had survived it. And that was enough for day one. But Amaka was not just returning, she was rethinking. Every evening after the market, instead of sitting and grieving, she sat with her mother and studied the business. She asked questions she had never asked before. Where do you buy the palm oil? Who sells Gary at the cheapest rate? How much do we spend on transport? She discovered that they had been buying small quantities at high prices because they had never had the capital to buy in bulk. She began to save aggressively, every coin, every small profit. She started waking up earlier to get to the wholesale market before others, so she could get the freshest stock at the best prices. She started keeping a small notebook where she wrote down every expense and every profit. The business was the same, but the woman running it had changed. Within 6 months, things began to shift visibly. They were making more money than before. Their regular customers noticed that prices had improved and stock was more reliable. New customers came. Amaka started supplying goods to 2 other smaller traders who did not have time to go to the wholesale market themselves. She charged a small delivery fee on top and used the extra income to expand their own stock. Mama Ngozi watched her daughter with wide eyes and a full heart. One evening she said, "Amaka, you are not just saving this business. You are building something new." Amaka looked up from her notebook and said quietly, "I know, Mama. I know." The real turning point came when a large school canteen in a nearby town needed a regular supplier for foodstuff. Amaka heard about the contract through one of her customers. She dressed neatly, took her notebook, and went to meet the school's procurement officer with prices, quantities, and a reliable delivery schedule written out clearly. The officer was surprised by how prepared she was. She won the contract. That one contract tripled their monthly income. Amaka used the profit to rent a small store, no longer just an open market store, but a real, lockable, permanent store. She painted it herself one weekend morning with Chisholm by her side, the two of them laughing and getting paint on their faces. It was the happiest day Amaka had had in a very long time. And it belonged entirely to her. 3 years after David returned to town with his foreign wife, Amaka drove into the market in her own car, a clean, modest vehicle that she had bought with money she earned with her own 2 hands. People stopped to look. Not with pity this time. With genuine, wide-eyed admiration. The same market women who had once whispered about her foolishness now called out to her with pride. "Amaka, our daughter. Look at you." Old women who had prayed for her came out of their stalls just to touch her arm and say, "God answered." Amaka smiled at every one of them, parked her car, and went into her store, which was now a fully operational wholesale supply business with 3 workers, a delivery van, and contracts with 5 schools and 2 hotels. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, no longer worked in the open market. She sat at the front of the store, greeting customers and supervising with the authority of a woman who had raised a champion. She had been able to see a doctor about the knee pain she had suffered in silence for years, because Amaka had paid for it without being asked. Their house had been renovated, new roof, new floor, a real kitchen, a proper bathroom. Things Amaka had once only dreamed about were now simply her life. She had not chased them dramatically. She had built them slowly, brick by brick, day by day, with work and focus and a heart that had decided suffering was not the end of the story. And David? People in the town heard things through the way small towns always hear things. The marriage to Elena had not been the paradise he had imagined. Elena's father had been generous at first, but he was also controlling. He placed conditions on every opportunity he offered David. David had taken a position in one of the man's companies, but he was not free, he was managed, watched, and owned in ways he had not expected. Elena herself was not unkind, but she came from a world that did not understand struggle, and so she could not understand the parts of David that still remembered where he had come from. The relationship had grown cold and businesslike. He had built a career, yes. But he had not built a home. And in his quietest moments, in ways he never said out loud, he thought about a woman with patient eyes and a warm laugh who had believed in him before he had given her any reason to. One afternoon, David came back to town alone. He had heard about Amaka's success, and something, guilt, nostalgia, a broken man's longing for what he had destroyed, had brought him to the street where her store stood. He stood across the road and watched. He saw her laughing with a customer. He saw her sign a delivery paper with a confident hand. He saw her walk to her car with the posture of a woman who owned the ground she stood on. He stood there for a long time, unseen. And then, slowly, he turned and walked away. He did not go in. He did not speak to her. Because some things cannot be undone with words. Some debts cannot be repaid. And some people outgrow the space they were broken in, and become too large for the people who broke them to ever fit back into their story. Amaka never knew he had stood there. She was too busy living. That evening, she drove home, cooked a pot of soup with her mother, and they ate together outside under the open sky, just like they always had. Mama Ngozi looked at her daughter and said, "I told you, Amaka. I told you your reward was coming." Amaka smiled, looked up at the stars, and said, "You did, Mama. You did." And the night was warm, and the food was good, and the woman who had once stood at a motor park in the rain, giving away her last gold, that woman was gone. In her place sat someone stronger, brighter, and completely, beautifully free. If this story touched you, don't just keep it to yourself, share it with someone who needs to hear this red heart and subscribe for more real-life stories like this.